When we talk about World War III, many people still imagine it as something far away, perhaps just a dramatic storyline from movies or history books. But the reality is more unsettling. The early signs of a new global conflict are already visible in today's headlines. Every week we see tensions rising, not only in Europe but also in Asia and the Middle East. These events are not isolated. They are connected pieces of a much larger puzzle, one that reveals how the world is entering a dangerous new era of power struggles. The war of the future will not begin with a sudden declaration, but rather with a gradual buildup of political, economic, and technological confrontations that we are already witnessing. Unlike the world wars of the 20th century, where massive armies clashed openly on battlefields, the conflict of our time looks very different. It doesn't have a single front line or one clear beginning. Instead, it spreads quietly through sanctions, cyber operations, and proxy confrontations in smaller regions. Nations test one another's strength indirectly, pushing limits without crossing the final line into open war. This gray zone conflict, as many analysts call it, makes it hard to say when war truly begins, because in some ways, it has already begun. What we are experiencing is not a sudden explosion of violence, but a slow-motion struggle that spans continents. At the heart of this struggle are two superpowers, the United States and China. For decades, the US has stood as the dominant force shaping the global order, but now it faces a rising challenger determined to reshape the rules. China's growing influence in trade, technology, and military reach is shifting the balance of power. This rivalry is not just about who has the bigger economy or the stronger army. It is about competing visions for the world's future. One side seeks to maintain the current order, while the other pushes to rewrite it. Their competition sets the stage for a potential confrontation that affects not just them, but every nation caught in between. Adding more complexity to this rivalry is Russia, which plays the role of disruptor and opportunist. Its actions in Eastern Europe were not only about controlling territory, they were a clear signal to the West that the age of unquestioned American dominance is over. Russia is determined to assert its influence, not only in its own region but also in global energy, security, and diplomacy. By challenging the status quo, it positions itself as a third player in the game of global power, forcing both Washington and Beijing to adjust their strategies. But beyond borders and military maneuvers lies the deeper truth. Today's power struggles are about much more than land. They are about control of the world's most critical resources, technologies, and systems that determine the future of humanity. From energy supplies and shipping routes to rare earth minerals and artificial intelligence, every aspect of modern life is part of the competition. The nations that dominate these sectors will hold the keys to tomorrow's global order. And that, more than anything else, explains why the tensions we see today feel less like random events and more like the opening chapters of a much bigger story. Energy has always been at the center of global conflicts, but in today's world, it has become more critical than ever. Nations are not only competing for oil and gas but also for renewable resources and technologies that will define the next generation. The control of pipelines in the Middle East, liquefied natural gas in Europe, and rare earth minerals in Africa is no longer just an economic issue. It is a strategic weapon. Whoever controls energy flows controls political leverage. We are witnessing how energy shortages can destabilize economies, weaken alliances, and even influence elections. In this sense, energy itself has become a silent battlefield in the unfolding global power struggle. Beyond physical resources, the digital arena has opened up a completely new dimension of conflict. Cyber operations are no longer limited to stealing data. They now threaten financial systems, energy grids, and even transportation networks. A single successful attack on critical infrastructure could paralyze entire cities or nations without a single soldier crossing a border. This is why experts say the future of conflict will not only be fought with tanks or missiles but also with algorithms and hidden code. The rise of cyber warfare means that every country is vulnerable, and every citizen, whether they realize it or not, is part of this digital battlefield. Technology is advancing at a pace that makes the struggle even more unpredictable. Artificial intelligence, once a futuristic dream, is now shaping military strategy and national security policies. Countries are racing to build AI-driven systems that can predict threats, automate defenses, and even deploy autonomous weapons. While some argue this could make conflicts less human and more precise, others warn it could trigger decisions made by machines, not people. The idea that wars could be decided in seconds by algorithms highlights just how different the next global conflict may look compared to anything in the past. The silent front lines of this global struggle are not limited to Europe or Asia. They stretch across Africa and Latin America as well. In Africa, massive infrastructure projects funded by China are reshaping economies and giving Beijing influence that rivals traditional Western powers. Meanwhile, the United States and its allies try to counterbalance this by investing in security partnerships and trade agreements. In Latin America, Russia seeks opportunities to build influence in regions historically tied to Washington. These regional moves may not dominate international headlines, but they are part of the larger chessboard that defines the global balance of power. Even outer space is no longer neutral territory. Satellites, once used primarily for communication, navigation, and scientific research, are now seen as strategic assets and potential targets. Nations are testing anti-satellite weapons and developing space-based defense systems, signaling that the skies above us may become the next frontier of competition. Control of space is not only about military dominance. It also determines who commands the future of global communications, navigation, and surveillance. In many ways, space has become the high ground of modern geopolitics, and whoever secures it could hold an unmatched advantage in the decades ahead. Mainstream media often simplifies global tensions into a black and white narrative: democracies versus authoritarian regimes, good versus evil. But the reality is far more complex. Each nation is guided by its own history, culture, and strategic interests. For example, some countries prioritize security above all else, while others emphasize economic growth or technological leadership. This complexity makes the current situation so difficult to predict. The untold truth is that no nation is acting purely as a hero or a villain. Instead, every player is navigating survival in a world where influence, resources, and power are becoming increasingly contested. While governments debate strategy and military leaders draw up plans, ordinary people feel the impact of these struggles most directly. Families in conflict zones live with uncertainty every day, unsure of their future. Workers across the globe face economic instability when sanctions or trade wars disrupt markets. Even people far from the front lines are affected through rising food prices, inflation, and shortages. The global power struggle is not something happening somewhere else. Its consequences ripple into households, businesses, and communities worldwide. This hidden cost of geopolitical rivalry is often ignored, yet it affects millions of lives more than headlines suggest. Economics, in many ways, is the silent engine driving global competition. Inflation, energy crises, and disruptions in supply chains are not random problems but symptoms of deeper power rivalries. When nations impose sanctions, the ripple effect is felt in international markets. When shipping routes are disrupted, it impacts global trade and the cost of everyday goods. Economists warn that financial systems themselves could become tools of modern conflict, with entire nations cut off from banking networks or digital currencies. This means that the struggle for dominance is not just about armies and alliances, it is also fought in stock markets, trade routes, and currency exchanges. Alliances, too, are being tested in ways not seen since the Cold War. NATO, once the unshakable cornerstone of Western defense, now faces internal divisions as member nations weigh their national interests against collective responsibility. At the same time, new alliances such as BRICS are rising, offering alternative visions of cooperation and challenging the Western-led system. These shifting alliances illustrate how the world is moving away from a single dominant order and toward a multipolar reality. The question is whether these competing alliances will stabilize the system or fracture it even further. Here lies one of the most unsettling truths. World War III, if it comes, may not resemble the wars of the past at all. It might not even be officially declared. Instead, it could continue as a hybrid conflict fought through economics, technology, cyber operations, propaganda, and limited proxy battles. This blurring of war and peace makes it difficult to recognize when the world has crossed the threshold into global conflict. Are we still in an era of uneasy peace, or has the Third World War already begun in slow motion? The ambiguity is itself a weapon, allowing nations to escalate without taking full responsibility. This raises a difficult but important question. Would the world even recognize the start of a third global conflict? In past wars, there was a clear moment when battles began, but in the modern age, lines are blurred. Today's confrontations unfold through economic sanctions, disinformation campaigns, cyber intrusions, and regional disputes that rarely get labeled as war. This ambiguity creates uncertainty, making it possible that we are already experiencing the first stages of a larger conflict without realizing it. The slow, silent escalation can be even more dangerous than sudden explosions, because it gives the illusion of stability while tensions quietly build underneath. In this new era, the battle for influence is not only fought with weapons or policies, it is fought with information. Experts often call it the war of narratives. Governments, media outlets, and online platforms compete to shape how people see the world. Propaganda, disinformation, and manipulated news stories spread rapidly across social media, influencing public opinion faster than traditional diplomacy ever could. This means that the fight for truth and perception has become just as critical as control of physical territory. Whoever wins the information war holds immense power to shape the decisions of nations and the mindset of global citizens. Every viral video, leaked document, or trending hashtag can play a role in this struggle. The digital landscape has turned ordinary people into participants, even if unintentionally. A single tweet or video can trigger international debates, move financial markets, or shift political narratives. This new reality shows that minds and emotions are the new battlegrounds, and information itself is the weapon. The untold truth is that World War III, if it unfolds, may be fought as much in our smartphones and computer screens as in distant geopolitical arenas. Control over what people believe and how they react is becoming the most powerful tool of all. And yet, despite the warnings and the rising risks, history also reminds us of humanity's resilience. In the darkest periods, diplomacy, dialogue, and cooperation have sometimes pulled the world back from the brink. The voices of ordinary citizens, activists, and communities can also influence leaders and push for peace instead of escalation. While leaders compete for dominance, there remains the possibility of new agreements, compromises, and shared efforts to prevent the worst outcomes. The story of our future is not yet written, and choices made today can still reshape tomorrow. The ultimate truth is sobering but clear. World War III is not inevitable, but it is possible. The struggles we see today are part of a global contest that involves every nation and, indirectly, every individual. From the food we eat to the technology we use, we are all connected to the forces shaping this potential conflict. The decisions of governments, corporations, and ordinary people will determine whether the next chapter of history is one of destruction or cooperation. What happens in the coming years will define not only who holds power, but whether humanity can rise above rivalry and create a more stable world.